Okay, I want to make one thing clear. For society to work and not devolve into chaos, people have to obey the laws. And in this case, passing these drone exams are part of the law related to flying drones over 250 grams. So even if the exams are dumb, you need to take them and pass them. Otherwise, you're breaking the law. Okay, enough said about that. Hi, I'm Don from DonDronesOn. Let me come straight to the point. The questions on the Canadian drone exams, both the basic and the advanced, are absolutely ridiculous. Transport Canada needs to come to their senses and change the knowledge requirements to focus on drone safety, not nonsense like hypoxia. Let's get into this right now. TP 15263 defines the 8 knowledge areas for the exams. Here's how this works. Each knowledge area has a number of knowledge requirements and associated learning objectives. Based on these, Transport Canada, working with ground schools and other industry brainiacs, came up with a pool of exam questions. When you take the exam, a random selection of questions are pulled from the pool according to the distribution of questions set for each area. As a result, no two exam experiences are alike, although you may see some questions more than once if you take a few attempts to pass. The problem is that so many of the questions are dumb, and they're dumb because the knowledge areas themselves are dumb. No surprise, they are almost identical to the knowledge areas on the private pilot exam for manned aircraft. Check it out. The only one extra on the private pilot list is flight instruments. And yeah, they actually buried a bunch of questions about altimeters and airspeed indicators into the drone exam. Now, why would they mirror manned aircraft requirements so closely? Well, in my opinion, they just got completely off on the wrong foot. Most, if not all of the contributors to this exercise were manned aircraft pilots. So they started from what they knew. And they started with the notion that drones are aircraft. And drone pilots better think like manned aircraft pilots, and they just got totally carried away. And it seems there was no one on the committees to stop them and say, hang on, aren't these people flying machines that can be carried in one hand, most of which are battery powered and operating close to the ground and away from airports? Now, I'm just speculating about this as the root of the problem. Before launching into preparing this video, I reached out to Ryan Coates, the head of Transport Canada's RPAS team, to discuss the rationale behind the questions. Here's the email I sent. As I said here, I didn't want this video to be perceived as being a one-sided argument. Well, after a nudge, Ryan finally answered. In short, no thanks. But he did say that his team is open to receiving constructive feedback with respect to the exam questions, which would help with some revisions they're planning on making later this year. I've included Ryan's email address in the description below this video in case you want to voice your opinion, but please keep it civilized. So anyways, lacking an actual answer, we'll have to assume that, yeah, they figured that for drone pilots to be operating safely in the almighty airspace, they better understand as much as possible about how the airspace is structured for manned aircraft, how manned aircraft pilots operate, and the issues and challenges facing manned aircraft pilots. Unfortunately, as I said in my email to Ryan, this is absolute hogwash. It's akin to requiring bicycle riders to understand truck gearing systems to be considered safe cyclists. Drone exams should focus on 3 things, in my opinion. 1, the drone regulations themselves. Yes, you should be tested on these, no question. 2, where you can and cannot fly legally, and how you can tell. And given that we're now well out of the 1980s, this should definitely not require us to read VFR charts. And 3rd, the exam should test us on the practical elements of safe drone operations, things like pre-flight checks of the drone's propellers and batteries, not the theory behind the rotors or the chemical composition of the batteries. Those are dumb. And by the way, in case I forget, as I get all up in a lather here, the most fundamental thing about education, learning, and testing is feedback. Tell the person exactly which questions they got wrong and the correct answer. What the f were they thinking with this high secrecy around the exam questions and the answers? Even if I pass my exam, I should still be told what I screwed up so I can understand the correct answer. What if the only question I answered wrong was whether it was okay to fly stupidly in controlled airspace? How does anyone learn if you don't get specific and immediate feedback? Right now, you can get 35% of the questions wrong on the basic exam and still be considered a certified drone pilot. And no, seeing some vague blurb about the knowledge areas you got wrong is not enough. Then there's the advanced exam, requiring you to answer 40 out of 50 of these crazy questions correctly in an hour. That's 72 seconds per question. Here's what a commercial manned aircraft pilot said about the exam recently. Passed the advanced exam on my second attempt, thanks to your videos. I'm a commercial pilot, manned aviation, and I must say I've struggled with some of the questions. And before clicking finish, I was very unsure of my results. The test is hard, and even with aviation background, preparation is required. Now, sure, the exam certifying you to fly drones in controlled airspace near airports and people, that should not be a cakewalk. But is there a reason it needs to be so challenging that people with extensive aviation experience and who are allowed to fly a manned aircraft in these environments is so challenging? This is totally up. Okay, I've calmed down now, and maybe I should have changed my shirt. So let's move on. We're not allowed to discuss the exam questions themselves. So what I did was walk through every one of the underlying knowledge requirements. What does a knowledge requirement actually look like? Well, back in TP 15263, as you wade through the knowledge areas, you'll see tables like this. The tables contain the knowledge requirements, often but not always backed up with reference numbers into the Canadian aviation regulations, like this one, 602.100, Mandatory Frequency Reporting Procedures on Departure. Yes, that's something that drone pilots should know, according to Transport Canada. On the left, we see whether it applies to basic or advanced operations, or both. Underneath the table are somewhat more drone-related learning objectives. Unfortunately, in a lot of the cases, they are only loosely tied to the knowledge requirements. Here we see that drone pilots must be able to recall the minimum operating conditions for VFR flight in uncontrolled airspace. Why do we need to know this? There are 363 knowledge requirements for the advanced exam, of which 269 are also applicable to the basic exam. And by the way, the reason I have all this data is because I translated it all from the document into an Excel spreadsheet a while ago and used it ruthlessly to ensure my drone videos covered all of the requirements. Covering all the knowledge requirements is one of the criteria to be recognized by Transport Canada as a drone ground school. And my self-paced study program is on that official list. This is a lot of work to put together. So I've gone through all 363 requirements, referencing the learning objectives as well, and scored each one on what I call Don's magic scale of sanity. Good means it focuses on the right stuff, drone regulations, where you can fly, or practical safe drone operations. Okay means it's, well, maybe a bit off in the weeds, but still a reasonable thing to know. Then the bad ones. No need means it is unnecessary stuff, like the names of clouds. Not totally crazy, but certainly not something we should be tested on. And finally, dumb. And to be honest, I did use a different word originally. Ones I scored as dumb are absolute nonsense. You know, like how best to settle arguments with your crew. These have absolutely no business being on a drone exam. So here's the result of my analysis. First, I'll show you the numbers, then I'll share some examples. According to my evaluation, over half the basic exam knowledge requirements are either unnecessary or just plain dumb and should be massively scrubbed to align to sensible focus areas. For the advanced exam requirements, the results are even more startling. Fully 63% of the knowledge requirements are either unnecessary or dumb. Now, to be honest, I was expecting this to be more like 80% dumb going into it, so I was a bit surprised at how many requirements were seemingly reasonable. If you're looking for a positive spin, there it is. Let's have a look at 3 examples out of the 61 dumb requirements to see where I'm coming from and why. Example 1 is actually 2 separate dumb knowledge requirements. Drone pilots are expected to know the different types of motors: brushed, unfortunately spelled wrong, brushless, in-runner, and out-runner, as well as speed controllers, and describe the characteristics of them. Now, why do we need to know this in order to fly our drones safely? Do you know the characteristics of different kinds of car or truck motors? Gasoline, diesel, hybrid? Maybe you do, but who cares? Does it help you drive your own vehicle more safely? Would knowing the differences between motor types or speed controllers help you fly more safely? Or should you simply be required to know the characteristics of the drone and its motors that you actually fly? Second example, and again it is actually 4 requirements, all related to what drone manufacturers are required to do to declare their drones to different advanced operations categories. This is not something a drone pilot needs to know at all. And by the way, there are no learning objectives tied to these 4 requirements. Why are they even on the list? Third and last one, real easy one in the meteorology area, and it applies only to advanced exams, thank goodness. Drone pilots are expected to describe the chemical composition of the atmosphere. Yep, this is dumb. And these are just some of the more obvious ones. How about the function of a helicopter's collective control, the theories of lift and drag, or the principle of operation of a pitot tube system? The requirements are riddled with these things, theories and other stuff that's not necessary for safe drone flying. Again, I've classified 61 requirements as dumb, but then there are another 160 that I consider as unnecessary for a drone exam. Interesting stuff to know, maybe, but not needed for the safe operation of a drone, and hence should not be on a drone pilot exam. So to wrap things up, I recommend Transport Canada get their heads out of, well, wherever they are, and into the 21st century. Drone pilots do not need to know everything manned aircraft pilots need to know. They do not and should not be flying using tools and systems designed for manned aircraft pilots. Stuff like VFR charts and METARs. These are not suitable for the task. They are not fit for the purpose or even remotely sensible. And as such, we should not be tested against requirements that are focused on areas like that. The knowledge requirements and the exam questions derived from them should be thoroughly scrubbed and refocused on drone regulations, where you can fly, and safe operation of your drone. To me, it looked like well over half the exam question pool is likely trash. Shame on Transport Canada for putting this nonsense on the table, and shame on the industry working group that contributed to it, including ground schools. If you're a drone pilot and feel strongly about this, send your feedback to Transport Canada. They say they're looking for feedback. Well, give it to them, clearly and constructively and politely. The email address is in the description below this video. Well, that's it for me. I need to go for a walk to cool off. And yes, I'll be doing a similar analysis of the actual drone regulations in the near future, once I cool down. Thanks for watching.